Hello, hello. We are going into the final part, the big finale of my Manga Extravaganza, where I tried to, as comprehensively as possible, go through all of the manga that have impacted me in my life. And even though I tried to make it as comprehensive as possible, it's nowhere near comprehensive. This section, most of all, is just kind of a drop in the bucket compared to all the things that aren't captured by manga decks. But whatever. We're going to take a look at what's in there and then call it quits for now because the series is like 10 hours long. Before that, I want to give a little shout out to Skip and Loafer, which I talked about in the manga I'm planning to read video. Well, now it has shifted into the manga I'm reading and I'm caught up with category. Oh my god, the series is good. Oh my god, the series is so good. I it's I knew it was gonna be good just because it had been praised so much by people whose tastes I respect. But it really is something special. It reminds me a lot of Yugami Kun Has No Friends, which we talked about in a previous video, and I praised very highly, and I think I gave 2 stars to. This as well, I'm gonna throw 2 stars on. I think both of these series just have such excellent characterization, although the types of characters they're looking at are extremely different. Both of them operate so well within this mode where you're examining not just the characters' personalities, but how they perceive other characters and their own quirks and personalities filtered through their experiences and expectations and stuff. It just leads to such beautiful moments of like interpersonal epiphany where people come to understand one another better, and learn how maybe they can support one another better. It's just so beautiful. It's just all about forming connections and getting closer, and understanding yourself and understanding what you want from life. Some of the characters, actually every character, a couple characters in particular, I find really really relatable. That just really remind me of myself in terms of their quirks and ambitions and experiences. And then other characters, every character is presented in such a way that you can empathize with them, that you can find some common seed between their personality and yours, between your anxieties and theirs. Even characters that you feel like are total 180s from you, you really understand the universally human qualities that are deep down inside of them. Oh my gosh, it's so good. I can't wait to read more. I marathoned through all of these 7.5 or so volumes in the last 3 days, and I was just so enraptured and enamored. Last night I was at my boyfriend's place, and I read some of the most recent chapters, and I was squealing and flopping around on the couch and generally embarrassing myself, but I don't care. That's how good it is. That's what it deserves. Okay. With that said, now we're going to move into the completed section. These 69 titles are the last that we're going to talk about. There's some bangers in here. I'm, of course, going to continue awarding our 1 to 3 stars. And we're going to start off with one that's going to get a star. Bloom Into You. This beautiful Yuri series that again really does a great job of having kind of like a multiple layered reflective characterization where you're not just kind of learning about people, but you're learning about them through the eyes of other characters. I really like how they kind of foreground something like the student council presidency and kind of the ambitions and the challenges of that. They have characters that are like very rich and complex, such that the Yuri, it's not so much like it's an afterthought, but it's something that kind of blooms very organically from that space. It doesn't feel contrived. It doesn't feel like this is an excuse for a love story, but instead is just a very compelling story in its own right that brings these two people together. This is definitely like a gold standard in the field of Yuri. Something that I think was hugely influential on this kind of new era of very psychological Yuri. It's not everything has to be super fluffy, although it's good that occasionally things are super fluffy. And I think it really told a very concise, complete story unto itself. There was no sense of forced drama, new arcs and challenges just cropping up to enliven things and to keep things going, but instead just this very focused vision of how these characters are going to have to grow and relate to one another to kind of progress through these very kind of established problems and tragic flaws and stuff. Fantastic, fantastic. All right, Attack on Titan. What can we say about this? Something that became a global phenomenon with the release of the anime. A series that's gone through many, many phases, many, many arcs, at some points being kind of like a horror series, other times a military tactics series, other times this intense sociological study taking place in this fantasy world, at other times an allegory for real world issues. I've always thought that the ideology of this series is a little muddled, that it's kind of difficult to understand. Like, it's one of those series that's so firmly in the gray area, where there's no characters that are fully heroes or fully villains, which is cool and very compelling, but in the end just sort of leaves you a little disoriented with what you're supposed to be cheering for and what you're supposed to be fearing. I think at its best, the series has some very, very experimental, very compelling work in just kind of the medium of manga. The paneling sometimes gets very bold and innovative. The action sequences, even though I wouldn't say this guy is technically a super strong author, or these action sequences I think have like a really good sense of like weight, terror, velocity. There's a lot of, I think, really interesting twists. A lot of the kind of long-awaited explanations I found satisfying, in that they really seem to open things up while still answering a lot of questions. It wasn't just always like mystery bait, which I think a lot of these series can kind of fall into, especially when they run a long time. But the thing is, this series did run a long time, and I think some of the arcs are quite weak. A lot of the characters, I think, just get kind of poorly developed, and a lot of the kind of twists and elaborations and stuff just kind of feel belabored. I don't know. It's not a bad series. Like, I know a lot of people kind of condemn it for its morality. There's a lot of discussion of this series being kind of fascist. And I would say it's certainly more fascist than most manga I've read. But again, it always takes a lot of care to present all of the sides as flawed, all of the ideologies as eventually self-destructive. And I'd say the only kind of consistent thing it asks is to break these cycles, to grow, to not just enact revenge back and forth over and over forever. Which is a pretty beautiful message, but even that is like, it's hard to kind of see it triumphantly. It's hard to kind of discern it from this chaos. So, I don't know. I've never been the hugest fan of this series, obviously. Some people, this is like their absolute favorite. This is the thing that got them into anime. This is the first really mind-blowingly expansive manga they read. But I'm not one of those people. I think it's just neat. Here's a gender swap series that I really enjoyed. I like this author, Kobayashi Kino. We'll probably see a few more of their works on here. Actually, I want to see what other stuff they're doing. I'd say, oh yeah, this one, I hope I have in the completed category. Yeah, okay, we'll talk about this later. I'd say they really have a good sense of fun, of character, of kind of just like a laid-back rom-com or slice-of-life series. I think their comedic styles are really good. I think their art is really good. Their character design is really good. But they can't really write satisfying climaxes. And this is a complaint I've read again and again about a lot of their series, is that like they have such good setups and such good development, and then inevitably they seem to kind of fumble the ball in like just kind of delivering some catharsis, delivering a resolution. Things always kind of trail off with like, oh, and then, and you know, maybe this is spoilers, but the series is no different. But if you like gender swap shenanigans, if you like the super lazy character archetype, which I do, this is worth checking out. This is a series written by the kind of strange, fetishy doujin and short series author Mochi Ole. but is illustrated by somebody who's much more like conventionally technically skilled. So it's kind of an interesting combination. This one was kind of fun. The gender misunderstandings is pretty typical of Mochi Ole. Just kind of endless gags around that confusion. But of course, in the end, all the secrets are out, everything is accepted, and you just have a happy, handsome couple. I think the gags around this girl being like extremely sheltered and just not knowing how society works at all is a lot of fun. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Hina Matsuri. What a fun one this is. This will get a star. Another in the genre we mentioned before of real hardcore mafioso type suddenly has to take care of a little girl, and suddenly is forced into a much more domestic life and all of the shenanigans that ensue with, you know, the two phases of his life intersecting. Actually, I think when I talked about that, that wasn't in a manga video. That was in the anime preview video, but whatever. I assume if you're watching this, you probably watched that too. Anyways, it's a fun genre, and this one takes it to another layer by also adding in a whole bunch of very bizarre supernatural elements. I think my favorite thing with this one is just the characterization. Everyone is like so degenerate, so scummy. Everything is taken to such extremes. I remember talking about this when I first like reviewed the anime, which is also fantastic. That this series is just kind of obsessed with like an escalation of a joke, where you get a bizarre situation, and then the joke is how bizarre it is, but then the joke becomes how normal it is. That it's just kind of like a fact of life now. For example, we have this character, I can't remember her name, but through a series of misunderstandings and mishaps, she starts working at a bar, even though she's in like middle school. And then, of course, initially the joke is that she's working in a bar, but then the joke is how everyone has just come to accept that she's working at a bar. And then the joke becomes that she's actually like a phenomenal bartender. And then she gets access to all sorts of secrets and stuff because everyone is spilling their guts to her. And then she becomes this really high-powered businesswoman. The joke becomes that she's one of the more powerful CEOs on the planet. And then, of course, the joke underneath all of it is that she doesn't want any of this. She just wants to be a normal high school girl at this point. And her entire life has just been transformed into this hyper-escalating series of mogul moves. It's so fun. And almost every character has an arc kind of like that. All the mafioso, Yakuza type stuff is really fun. It's delivered with just the right amount of grit, where it's not even the characters don't feel like authentic at all. It's by and large a comedy, but it's like so much in that like underworld, just like teeming with the feeling of shadiness and intrigue and stuff, that you still get some of that appeal, even though all the characters are so goofy. And then the supernatural stuff, I don't want to spoil too much, but the resolution to it, the explanation for why all these girls with psychic powers exist and why they keep beaming into different places in these strange orbs, when that's finally explained, it's one of the most satisfying explanations I've ever read for such a thing in a manga, because it's so stupid. And because, again, it escalates. It's such an absurd way from such a ridiculous premise. It's amazing. It's great. Check it out. Watch the manga and then, or watch the anime and then read the manga if you had enjoyed it at all. What can we say about this? I read it. I watched the anime first, which is one of the most trashy anime of all time. And there's a lot of fun memes around just how garbage guzzling it is. It's like they took Ori Emo and just decided to make it trashier. And then, you know, I wanted to see what happened after the anime, so I read the manga too, and it is what it is. I don't have anything to say about it. This one, alright, so I remember reading this and like really, really enjoying it. Just being like really captivated by it, being brought to tears by it, being so compelled by what was gonna happen. And I think that's like generally the feeling of it. And from my memories of it, I'm gonna give it a star. But a while ago, I was talking to my boyfriend about manga, and he was asking me for like recommendations because, of course, you know, I'm the taste champ. I know what's up. And I was like, oh, you should read Lucifer and the Biscuit Hammer. This is like, a real classic series. This is one that is often brought up in these kind of like battle series discussions. And he read it and he was just kind of like, I wasn't feeling it. and kind of like as he explained the stuff that like bugged him about it, I was like, yeah, this is a weird series, Like, you remember the real heroic moments, you remember the self-sacrifices, the twists, how compelling the characters are, how brutal and stark some of the fight scenes are. But all of that is, like, buffered by such a host of just kind of, like, weird quirks, like character details that really don't need to be there, or bits of fan service that just feel so tonally inappropriate. But the thing is, I don't think any of that makes me like it less. I think all of that just kind of contributes to the manga-iness of it. That it really highlights how much of an autorial medium this is. That you have this creator that's so passionate, that's willing to draw 10 volumes of the series to bring about their personal vision. And then it's like, well, yeah, that personal vision might be weird. This is probably a weird person making this. And there's no avoiding that. That's just goes hand in hand with the entire creation of a manga. So that to me, I don't know. I can get why it's off-putting. I get why this is maybe not a series for everyone, kind of like I first assumed. But I think that makes it all the more special. This is a series that recently finished by Taku-sensei, Repeat a Year, Todome-senpai. I've been reading all of this guy's stuff off and on. This one was really fun. It's just about the stupidest girls you could ever imagine, who are constantly at verge of failing all their classes. And her fixation with her Kohai, who's now in the same year as her because she repeated a year, who's almost as dumb as she is, and she's compelled to make him fail because she doesn't want to be the lowest ranked in the class. And then, as you can probably assume from the cover, there's some fairly lewd shenanigans that emerge from this, all sorts of misunderstandings, all sorts of stupid bets and embarrassing situations, and I don't know, it's just a lot of fun. Definitely not, this person's like masterpiece, but something I quite like. This is a very brutally cringy series about the mishaps and failures of this poor woman, and a painfully cringy woman who works in an office and just has everything go wrong all the time. As you can imagine, it doesn't stay this way through all 100 chapters. And slowly she starts taking some W's, she starts getting a better handle on herself, she stops falling for all the same mistakes. But I do appreciate the commitment that for the vast majority of these chapters, just nothing good happens to her, and it's just like a sequence of failures. It's funny, it's not in the slightest heartwarming. She's not really an overly sympathetic character. Most of the time she brings about her own downfall out of ignorance or arrogance or bizarre assumptions or whatever. But you still end up really liking her. And as I said, eventually you get to really cheer for her as she takes those first steps into happiness. It's a good time. Check it out. This I think we talked about in the currently reading section because I had forgotten to move it over to completed. I'm pretty sure I did. But I'll summarize quickly again. This series is something really, really special to me. I think, like Skippin' Loafer and Yugami-san, it just has this really rich, multifaceted characterization, a characterization viewed through the lens of one to another. Except here they're all such weirdos. They're all such compellingly unique, total weirdos, trying to make little indie games in their high school club together. I think the depiction of gaming, of what it's like to kind of discover games with friends, is just almost painfully nostalgic and accurate. Just kind of the exploration of genres and mediums in games, and looking at stuff like Conway's Game of Life and Digital Organisms, just all these esoteric little paths that it meanders down, and then having some big emotional climaxes too that you wouldn't really expect from such a quirky little doujin series, but moments in this series have made me weep openly, and I think it'll stick with me forever. If I forgot to do it in the last ones, this one also gets 2 stars. I think there's just a certain tier of characterization that when I see it, I'm just awed, and I feel like everyone deserves to delve into this world that's so fascinating and so unique. This was a Yuri series about this office lady who becomes totally over the moon enamored by this doujinshi author's drawings, and then finds out the doujinshi author is a high school girl. And probably a lot of you are like, that's too much, red flag, creepy series alert. And you know what? I don't know. You're not wrong. And I think this series, in its attempts to kind of justify and normalize this pretty unacceptable age gap, could be pretty off-putting. But it's interesting to me that they do address it. They do have the characters really talk through, is this appropriate? Could this ever be okay? And even if it's not, convincing, it's still interesting and still kind of compelling that this becomes a subject. And then, of course, the other major theme of this story is making doujins, making art around a series that you both really enjoy. What does it mean to be a fan? What does that fanaticism give you? How does it support you through the day? And I think it's a very sophisticated, very human, empathetic exploration of that sort of fandom that I really, really enjoy. And I think the fact that it has this like super problematic element gives it kind of an extra layer of like authenticity almost, that like it's not preachy, it's not coming from like a distance place of observation, but it's coming from the meat of it. It's coming from somebody who, themselves, I'm sure, has wrestled with the appropriateness of relations or whatever. This was a nice, cute little series. I wish it had gone on longer. It's the mangaka that made Beastars, just writing about her life, writing about how she started in manga, writing about her family and childhood experiences. It's really, really cute, really endearing, just how relatable all of her little anxieties and stuff are, how fun and cute the things that she's retained from her childhood are. All her kind of firsts and explorations and stuff. And her art is just phenomenal. Let's take a quick look. The way she animalizes so many people, all these little diagrams she includes, the facial expressions. I love this kind of like marker shading that just kind of give everything such like a warmth and depth. It's so good. I wish it was longer. It's just 1 volume. It's so good. This was a Mahjong series by Fukumoto, one of his earlier works before it got so richly psychological and was more just about, here are some interesting Mahjong tactics. Oh, isn't this a weird hand? Oh, why'd he go for this? This one was really cool because it really shows you some glimpses of what Fukumoto eventually wanted to do. This is minor spoilers, I suppose, but... Wait a minute. Oh, wait. Is this the series, I think? Yeah, there's like a sequel to this too, I believe. Or maybe I'm just thinking of a different early Mahjong series. But it's like really fascinating because you can start seeing the more human stories emerge through Mahjong. That once they start stepping away from the table bit by bit, you get to see a lot more of Fukumoto's storytelling sensibilities. Really cool. Assassination Classroom. We talked about this in the Viz series. Very good. Ooh, Gakugarashi. This is an interesting one. The famous or infamous High School Girls and Zombies series. One that, for the length of the anime and the first few volumes was really bolstered by kind of like the central deceit that one of the characters was living delusionally and didn't recognize that her school has been overrun by zombies and they're in the middle of a zombie apocalypse. And then after that, it kind of like tries to keep up the same energy of something always eluding you, some fundamental twist to the entire of the situation. And I really admire how this manga took bold steps and kept changing the format, introducing characters, putting them in new locations with new challenges. But I feel like it's tough to recapture that magic of like the first big twists. And I kind of felt like it, at least on that front, it felt more and more contrived of, oh, but there is something even more sinister. Oh, but there is something even more sinister. Oh, but there is still something that you haven't recognized. But it's good. It was brutal. I liked how much it was willing to linger in despair. And even in some of these arcs that I think are a bit weaker, that just weren't as well motivated, the despair, you know, even if it was a little contrived, still really shone through. That you still felt so bad for these characters, which I like because I'm a sick freak. I'm happy to give this one a star. I think the art is fantastic. I think it had a really great sense of horror and how the paneling was done, how the page turns were done. You can tell that there was a lot of passion put into making this like an immersive emotional experience, and not just kind of like a sequence of ideas. So even though the ideas were kind of hit and miss for me sometimes, it was overall a very powerful experience. Good stuff. Shoutouts to Waterflame for scanlating it. Friend of the channel. Alright. This one's 2 stars. I'm starting to kind of recognize my own biases in my rating system, but it's tough because in my mind, it's not that I like this series because it's about art school, but just that it's a super, super compelling story that happens to be about art school, just as many other super, super compelling stories happen to be about art school. So this is about the author. It's in kind of an autobiographical comic, going through her long road to manga, all the people that influenced her on that path, particularly her art teacher, pictured here, and just, I don't know, just again, the richness of character, the wide variety of things she does, just the kind of like distanced recollection where she what was popular back then that she's facing the limits of memoir, where she's trying to recall these things, and in the imperfectness and the way that it's kind of stained by her perspective now. And just the art is so beautiful. The depictions of the paintings she was making in art school, and the scenery, the characterization, and then, as you see here, like diving really in deep to the logistics of the medium. I love stuff like that. I really love stuff like that. That gives me a sense of appreciation for how huge the project of manga and of art in general really is. Really, 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 really good. This artist you've probably heard of before. They did Jellyfish Princess, Princess Jellyfish, a lot of other really good series. I've been reading this off and on too, in physical volumes. Maybe I should just read it on Manga Dex and get caught up. But yeah, real legendary mangaka. I think this is her masterpiece. Something that just encapsulates her whole artistic vision. This was a fun series about a very laid-back, neat-like witch who just bums around and talks to her friend on the internet. It was nice. All the chapters are fun. They have a little magical element, a little neat type slice of life element, and then usually something about the changing seasons or opportunities in Japan, and just, I don't know, it just has a really lovely sense of place and time. I was most impressed with the series, I think, because it ends, if that makes sense. This is a series that they easily could have done 10 volumes of this sort of pattern. But because it did kind of move forward, and that it has this very sentimental, very kind of wistful ending, it gives the whole thing a little bit more of a, I don't know, fragility to it. It's nice. Alright, speaking of endings, this is a Yuri series that was abruptly canceled because Higashiyama Show, a figure with much controversy swirling around them to begin with for reasons I won't get into, was revealed to have traced some of the work in it, which is disappointing, and, you know, it's unfortunate that he needed to use that crutch at that time, and, you know, obviously all artists use photos for inspiration, all artists draw on things they've already seen. Often tracing is the start to like a more personalized artistic project, but here it's pretty cut and dry. It's just drawn right over some existing photos. Despite that, and despite the fact that this makes it end like that, with like really no resolution at all, I really love this series. I think Higashiyama Sho, and I talked about this in Vampires when I talked about Vampires in the currently reading section. Sho has like this feeling of like abandoning your life up until now to take the plunge into something, in many cases Yuri, but just into something that kind of comes along and falls into your lap and is just so different than your life up until now that you know you can't go back, that even if things weren't terrible before, it's not like these characters are, being tortured and suffering, but it's just kind of like you suddenly look upon what your life had been up till now with a sort of melancholy, and it's a feeling of, oh, that's it. That was just the entirety of that era of my life, and I'm choosing to end it now, and something new, something totally new is going to happen. I think that's really, really compelling, and it's something that comes across here very, very, very well. I'm going to give this a star. I think it's a really interesting and important series. And the fact that it ends so abruptly, I think, almost just adds to this allure, where it's almost like the characters have taken this plunge so much that you can't follow them anymore. You don't know what happens with them. You're not given that. They're just going to go off on their own. Very cool series. This is a weird one. The title says a lot of it. I think if it kept it simpler, and it was just about this guy who had a fixation that he wanted to be killed by a high school girl, which I think the opening sequence is really, really well articulated, and it's very haunting and gripping and compelling. Like just this internal monologue as he explains why he has this fixation of, I want to be killed by a high school girl, is really neat. It's very, very well done. But then it's so overcomplicated with all these like twists and supernatural elements and horror elements, and he has this huge master plan of how a specific high school girl is going to kill him. It's like kind of neat, but I think it really detracts from it. A little disappointing. This was a silly slice of life rom-com series where this normal dude, his desk mate, is like a Minotaur girl. I don't know, it was fine. It really only had that kind of one premise that she has horns. And, the title, like, I don't know, just playing into fan service, even in the title, kind of shoots itself in the foot for how wholesome or compelling it's going to be. This was a fun one. Just really nice, laid-back slice of life. The ever-popular genre of Yuri, where both people think the feelings aren't mutual, can go on forever. The series, of course, wraps up pretty quickly. So, I don't know. It's fun, compelling. This is a good one. This one gets a star. It's kind of like Nemo Sensei, who's a fantastic mangaka. We're going to talk about a few other of his works in this video, in this list. Also did Cupram's Bride, which I praised a lot. It's kind of like, they wanted to do their own Yotsuba. They wanted to do a child rearing series. And it's not, the absolute masterpiece that Yotsuba is, but it has a unique charm of its own. Madarumi-chan inexplicably has horns and a lot of quirks and a lot of fascinations and stuff, and those are explored in a really nice, mellow, laid-back way. I think I would be happy if any mangaka who wanted to make a series like this did so to this quality. It's just a really lovely genre, really cute, really fun. I think I can say kind of the paneling and the facial expressions and just the general vibe of it is very like Yotsuba inspired, and I say that as like a huge compliment. So I think it's something that successfully furthers that kind of tradition and appeal. This is the Teasing Master Takagi-san did a bunch of little one-shot pictures and stuff. They're cute. I don't know. There's nothing much to them. There's no dialogue or anything. This is a really fun series. So the premise here is this guy walks past this woman's window every day, and every day she's just doing something really bizarre within the window. I think it's one of those series that, even though the premise may seem sort of flimsy, the fact that they just went on for so long with it, with 74 different variations of what's happening behind the window, starts to make it really, really fun. So she never talks, she never explains what it is she's doing. He just kind of has to infer. Here it's a traditional sweets shop. Of course, it's never explained. It's very magical the way she transforms the interior of her apartment. I don't know. It's really nice. You know, there's not a whole lot to it, but it's all about like the fun and the sensual experience, right? That he really focuses in on what the food is like, how zany Madoka-chan is. There's a little bit of fan service, as you just saw. All in good fun. A really nice series. A good one. This is one of the strangest stories in manga. No, that's not even true. There's so many strange stories in manga. This is a strange story in manga. So this starts off very, very straightforward. We have a gal, very fan servicey, very shy, nebbish boy. They're thrown together. Suddenly, oh, you guys gotta live in the same house. I don't remember why, whatever. Her house is a mess. She has no idea how to clean up after herself. Well, it turns out this guy is a bit of an expert in cleaning and teaches her how to tackle the dishes and the laundry and the floors. And, you know, it's kind of fun. I like these kind of educational series where they give you some good tips and tricks in each chapter. The characterization was very, very standard, but, you know, okay. And then, abruptly, the author had enough. Didn't want to do this anymore. But was in some sort of contract where he couldn't just decide, okay, I'm going to stop writing this, let me out of the magazine. Instead, his only way forward was to get the series canceled. Okay? So, first he tries, let's just make this the most trashy fan servicey series ever. And now instead of, you know, fun cleaning time, we're going to have the class where she shows up and doesn't wear underwear. And it's like To Love Ru type shenanigans. Okay, that doesn't work. People still like it. Next, we're going to have a extremely disturbing, extremely in poor taste sexual assault flashback arc where you learn about this horrible, traumatizing past that the gal characters had. And that worked. They'd had enough of it after that. And then there's a bit of really bizarre forest wrap-up, and that's all we got. Really, 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 really weird. You can see the reviews speak volumes here. And this author hasn't done anything else. I assume they're going to start working under a different name if they do, because this has just indelibly stained. Not even our MC could get this stain out. The reputation of this name here. Yeah, what a disaster. What a train wreck. What an absolute shot to the foot. Nothing more to say about it. This is a really cool series of just this kind of strange child and growing up in their life and the fascination with the world. And I don't know, it's a very unique series in the art style, in the presentation. Very cute, very fun, very short, and I would say as a positive quality, sort of without a point, sort of without any kind of overall message or overall driving dramatic event or anything like that. Just kind of this languid slice of a person's life. I think this is kind of like, there's a lot of these one volume, very artistic manga, very literary, that exist and get published in Japan and probably have a very strong fan base, but never get scanlated and never get any sort of recognition outside of Japan, that are just little blips, little flashes of light. And it's all too rare and all too exciting. Ooh, what else do they got? To be able to see something like this. The scanlation group, Lovely Strange Dark. How does this follow me? I should follow them. I don't know how that works, but it's, I want to. Specializes in these sorts of stories. And I think that's how I found this one originally, but they've done a lot of stuff I haven't read yet. It just goes to show that, like, as much as it feels like we've been talking about manga for 8 hours, which is because we've been talking about manga for 8 hours, we haven't even scratched the surface of all the genres that are out there, all the artists that are out there, all the movements that are out there. It's humbling. It's very, very humbling. When you go into a manga store in Japan, the number of titles you have never seen before, you have never heard of, will outnumber the ones that you've had any sort of association with, any sort of familiarity with, like 3-1. It's just awe-inspiring how huge this medium is. And we're just doing our best to enjoy what we can. Here's something different. Very fan servicey series about an era where you can get animal ears surgically implanted for funsies, but then they influence your behavior and stuff, and because this is a super ecchi Yuri series, mostly they just make you horny. Yeah, I don't know. I have no shame at this point. I read this. I enjoyed it. I thought the art was very well done. I thought kind of the escalation of lewdness and stuff was well done. These are, of course, qualities that won't mean anything to you unless you're certain types of pervert, but it is what it is. I think just the whole kind of conceit around you can surgically implant animal ears on yourself, but it actually has like all of these risks and will make your life so much more complicated because you've become like animalistic to an extent. It's kind of interesting, you know? Like, they could have kept it a lot simpler. They could have made it cleaner, you know, in terms of the premise. But it was almost like they wanted to be like realistic to some extent and make it so bizarre and complicated. This was a really nice series. I think this is also Lovely Strange Dark. Another kind of one volume literary genre outside series. It's all about this little kid. It's full color watercolor about his animal friends, his human friends, his strange, quirky habits and stuff. Very minimal dialogue. It's really nice. You can tell this is something deeply nostalgic for the author. It's good. This was a Yuri series. I don't remember this too well. Okay, yeah, it's very short. Okay, well, I don't remember it too well. I like this description though. A story about two childhood friends, sweetness and fluff all around. Or a story about two childhood friends, furious and uncertain all around. I hate things like love. Alright, maybe I'll reread it, because I don't remember it that well. Okay, so this is another Kobayashi Kina series, which I don't know if this is actually completed. I don't remember how this ends, but it's a spin-off of Neneshi no Asterism, which is one we're going to talk about later. And it's looking at the BL side couple of that series, which I thought was one of the better developed parts of that series, one of the few that kind of felt like it was at least semi-concluded. And then I think they made the spin-off that doesn't act like undoes the sense of conclusion. They just can't help themselves. All right, here's Neneshi no Asterism. I actually really, really like this series. I'm going to give it a star. Despite the fact that, as I said before, this person cannot write a proper climax or conclusion to save their life. And you can see the reviews are kind of mid, and I think it's probably a lot of people that are like, it's good, except... And I don't care that this is spoilers, the ending sucks. It's just so inconclusive, so insubstantial, that it just kind of feels like the author got bored or couldn't come up with a way to end it. But aside from that, I think it's really, really nice. I think the art is nice. I think the feelings of the characters are so well conveyed. I think the love triangle, kind of taken at a very platonic ideal, but then complicated with a few side characters, is really well expressed. Like, you feel like all of the relationships between all the permutations of characters are substantial and well developed. And it again has this kind of sense of focalizing, where you're not just kind of seeing the characters as they are, but you're seeing them in turns through how other people see them. I think that's very, very well expressed early on. There's a chapter where, as I said, it's like a love triangle, a complete love triangle, and you see how each girl who has a crush sees the girl she's crushing on, what appeals to her, and then it becomes this full rotation where in the end you see how the first girl is appreciated by the last girl. And I don't know if I'm explaining this very well. It's very simple. The series itself is quite straightforward, but I think really, really lovely. Check it out. But again, the ending sucks. Brace yourself. This is another Yuri series. This one is very dramatic, very intense, about a friend group in university and all their trials and tribulations, sometimes dating each other, sometimes hating each other. I really like this one. I'm also giving this a star. I think it has a really good sense of like burn down drama, where it's not just like some interpersonal conflict will happen, but somebody's life will just kind of get trashed and they're going to be like in the pit, and it's not afraid to kind of drag you down into the unpleasantness with it. It's not so idealized, it's not so fluffy. And although it is maybe sort of idealized in the way that love and expressing your feelings and opening yourselves up as vulnerable and stuff is kind of like a cure-all to these problems that can pull them out of the deepest pits and give them hope and meaning again. Even though that might be a little idealistic and unrealistic, it's so powerful. And there's some moments in this series that still stick with me that if I think about them too much, I'm going to tear up, of characters admitting how much they need one another. And so good, so good. Okay, moving on to page 2, we have Shakunetsu no Takyo Musume. This is one that I would like to award more highly. I would like to give it a star. I think it's so much fun. It kind of feels like Saki, where all the characters are like so over the top, have so much personality that's conveyed not just through how they behave, but how they play their sport, in this case ping pong. It also has that really nice world building of Saki, where you're just so entranced and curious about like the power levels and who exists beyond and what makes them so strong. But again, it's got a bad ending. I'll spoil that now. It ends so abruptly, and it feels like it's kind of been canceled or something, and that the author had so many more ideas, but it just kind of like peters out. But it's really good while it lasts. It has a really good sense of energy, of conveying the game of ping pong and stuff. I think the anime was also really well done in this regard. The anime got really unnecessarily shit on just because the character designs are so goofy, but the anime was great. It had an amazing soundtrack. It had such compelling energy. I think like... So, before I was talking about, okay, like it has a bad ending, but that doesn't ruin the series. It's still like really good for what it is. But I think in this case, it does ruin it more, because so much of this type of series is built on what's still to come, and that sort of anticipation, in the sense that the characters are going to keep growing and getting more powerful and reaching some point of catharsis. So to have that kind of just peter out instead, I think really kind of stains the whole experience of reading it. But, it is what it is. Girls' Last Tour. What can I even say about this? It's so unique. It's so haunting and fascinating. It's so rich in world building and mystery. And yet so, like, simple, so goofy, so funny, so cute. It's really, really quite unique. I'm giving it a star. No, giving it 2 stars. This one really is something special. I don't want to say too much about it because I think it's one that, as much as possible, you just kind of immerse yourself in, the anime as well. Like, it's kind of like, obviously, oh, it's post-apocalyptic. It's these two girls. They're gonna start roaming around and trying to figure out what's what. And it's like, okay, maybe that is true. Maybe that is actually, a pretty simple summary of the story. But just the feeling you get while you read it is totally indescribable. And I think needs to just kind of be experienced firsthand. I can't recommend it on those sorts of strengths because they're so ineffable. All I can do is put these 2 stars on the screen, and hopefully by now that's a big enough deal. This Croc Will Die in 100 Days was a huge sensation that I think is going to get like a movie eventually or something. It started off as this kind of bizarre Twitter meme where this guy would just post a very short comic of a croc going about his daily business with various other animal friends, often just kind of 4 comas with a pretty simple gag. Not a whole lot to most of these. But of course, what entranced people, what made this such a phenomenon, was the super ominous message at the end of every chapter that was counting down the days until this croc is going to die. And it's like, what the hell? What compelled someone to make this? What is going on in someone's brain that they were like, this is a good idea? It's really bizarre. A lot of these gags just like barely make sense. And then we marched together over a span of over 3 months to see this croc die. And I won't spoil too much, but you know what? Die he does. And it's pretty impressive how they're able to build such this sentimentality, this sense of closeness and intimacy through all these little glimpses of Croc's life that were on their own pretty insubstantial, and even as a collection of 100, pretty insubstantial. But just with this lingering sense of, oh God, oh God, oh God. It's pretty good. I don't know. I don't think it's like such a masterpiece or anything. I think it mostly is just like a very interesting gimmick that was very well done. Okay. Gal Gohan. This was a fan servicey little rom-com about this gal who goes to high school, who gets a crush on her home ec teacher, and has him supervise and run this kind of cooking club after school. So we get like a couple different elements. There's the tension of will they, won't they, and yeah, okay, the fact that it's a high school girl and her teacher, pretty gross, pretty problematic. But it doesn't really try to justify it, just kind of like smooths over he doesn't want to do anything because it's extremely inappropriate, and she just can't be sated. She just can't help it. She's in love with him. And I think actually sometimes in rom-com this sort of problematic relationship or potential relationship actually has a really useful narrative purpose, where if it wasn't for this like huge obstacle of like it being totally inappropriate and it might get him fired or whatever, it would be so frustrating to see their relationship never progress. But now because there's an excuse, they can kind of like more reasonably have it in this perpetual mode of not making any progress, attempting to make progress, but everything is reset, blah, 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 blah. So you got that going on, the rom-com element. You got just kind of the fun of this gal character and her fascinations and her language and her outfits and stuff, which can get pretty fan servicey. But it's kind of wholesome too. Like, she's just a nice person deep down, and she genuinely just wants to learn from him and grow and become someone that he might be interested in. And then there's the cooking stuff. Ooh! As I've said many times before, I'm a very food-motivated person, and I think this series does a great job foregrounding the food, foregrounding the recipe, teaching you how to make it, teaching what the appeal is. It's nice. Here you can see his wholehearted, straightforward, I want to be a good teacher, and her Yeah, it's nice. It's fun. All right. This one I have very, very mixed feelings about. I think the setup. So I started reading this because I think this person is a fantastic Yuri Dojinshi artist. They've done a bunch of ones around Love Live, some Love Live pairings that I really like, and just has like a really good sense of romantic drama, of kind of those decisive emotional climaxes where you convey your feelings or, you know, reciprocate or whatever. I think they're masterful at that. And I was super excited, super excited to see that expressed through the series. The setup is fantastic. This extremely unrequited love, this impossible love of her falling in love with her sister-in-law. Her brother, older brother, is married, and she has a huge crush on this lady. I think it gets a little bogged down by extraneous elements. The side characters and stuff are okay. There's some side relationships that are kind of interesting, but there's not kind of like a tonal cohesiveness to it. It just kind of makes everything feel a little melodramatic, I guess, that there's just always dramatic stuff happening with somebody, somebody's fighting somebody, all sorts of like twists that are sometimes very well done and that they're kind of like painful, you know, discovering some hopelessness or whatever. But again, just kind of, I don't know, like I kind of see that this person's strengths lie more in the doujinshi format and that kind of like short, self-contained story instead of kind of the exhaustion of having so many obstacles, so many setbacks, so many roadblocks to the actual catharsis. I don't know. I think it had a lot of potential. I think the art is really well done. Some of the scenes are like so moving. There's one early on that really resonates with me where she overhears her sister-in-law talking about how she'd like to have children. And then it's just this kind of feeling of like, okay, on top of everything else, I already knew it was impossible for this relationship to work. And now I'm realizing that even if it was possible, she wouldn't be happy because we can't have children together. Which is, you know, pretty reductive, but that's what the character is thinking. And she has this moment where she realizes that she still actually had hope, that even though logically she knows it's impossible, the fact that it now has this like extra layer of impossibility made her feel worse, and that retroactively she realizes that she must have had hope that whole time, some small amount of secret hope. Ooh, that's good. Ooh, that's like very compelling, very powerful writing. And I remember reading that and thinking like, damn, like how are they going to pay this off? How are they going to like make good on this? How are they going to get to a point of catharsis from such well realized unhappiness and longing and despair? And spoiler alert, they didn't really do that very well. But it is what it is. It's still quite a nice series, even though, you know, it's gonna maybe frustrate you at times. I think it's worth checking out. Okay. I have a lot to say about Mob Psycho. There's still maybe like half this list to go. We'll come back to this later because I'm exhausted. I wanted to do this all in one video, but that's kind of ambitious. So we'll check it out then. All right. Bye-bye.